24 different players that will impact the outcome of your Week 9 fantasy football matchup. Should you be starting or sitting these different players at every single position? Cameron, I'm going to have you kick us off here. We'll start with the quarterbacks. As always, work our way down. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
It is redemption week for Geno Smith. Going from my sit of the week last week, which I was right on, to my start of the week this week against the Rams. Right. So far this season, Geno only has 3 games under 17.8 fantasy points, and they were against Buffalo, San Francisco, and Miami. I just want to be honest with you. The Rams aren't one of those 3 teams defensively. Okay. They are, and they're giving up the 10th most passing touchdowns and 5th most yards per attempt. Reason I bring up yards per attempt is because the Seahawks are throwing the ball more than any other team in the league right now, and Geno leads the league in both attempts and yards. I think Geno absolutely lights it up this week against Rams in this divisional matchup. He hopefully gets DK Metcalf back. That's a little bit of a question. That could take him down, a slight notch if he's not in there, but I still think he has a fantastic week if it is just JSN and Tyler Lockett.
At this point in the season, we can kind of look back and see the predictions that we had for some of these teams coming into this season. I remember being bullish on the Seahawks offense because I knew they're going to be throwing the ball significantly more than last year. And I had mentioned they're probably going to be throwing at a top 5 rate, but they are throwing at the highest rate in the league, which is always going to put Geno in a favorable position. And you get a smash matchup here to definitely start him. Are you on board with that, Ty?
Yeah, I don't mind Geno this week. The Rams have been playing a little bit better against the pass this year just because as of late, just because the pass rush is finally getting home now for the Rams. But that being said, this is not like a shutdown opponent by any means. So Geno can definitely take advantage of this again in what could be a very heavy passing game script for Geno. I can absolutely see him coming through this week.
I'll come right back to you here, Ty. Who is your quarterback start going to be this week?
Cam mentioned a new nickname for this guy. I think it was last week. It's the new Sammy Ball game. It's Sam Darnold. For how off the Vikings have looked after their bye week, Sam Darnold has still looked pretty good. He's been one of the very few bright spots on this Vikings team. He's second in completion percentage among all quarterbacks since coming off the bye week, and he's averaging nearly 250 passing yards a game. And we've talked about how Sam Darnold needs to throw touchdowns to be a startable option because there's just no rushing upside with the guy. But this week is just set up for Darnold to succeed, to be a startable option, right? He gets Indy, who are 5th in total yards per game allowed, total yards allowed per game. They're 9th in completions allowed and are allowing the 6th highest completion percentage to quarterbacks. So Minnesota should be able to move the ball effectively in this game. And I don't think it's a long shot for Darnold to have a multi-touchdown game either.
Yeah, I mean, we were reminded last week that Sam Darnold and this Kevin O'Connell-led offense is still a viable fantasy option. How high are you on Sam Darnold this week, Cam?
Yeah, I think he for sure has to be an option. If you look at it, you take out that Jets game where it was just disgusting. Other than that, he's been phenomenal. If you take out that game, he's averaging 19.4 fantasy points per game, which puts him as the quarterback 7 on the season. So he's been a consistent starter. He's put up starter level numbers, week after week. He's done pretty much everything that you can ask from him. 17 and 18 after the bye. And like Ty said, this is a good matchup for Sam Darnold. They have Joe Flacco, so they're going to throw the ball more, which hopefully will lead to a higher scoring game where Darnold continues to move the ball downfield. I got to agree. I really like Sam Darnold. I think he's probably pushing top 10 quarterback this week.
Would this make a difference if Anthony Richardson was starting this week and not Joe Flacco? Would you be lower on Sam Darnold because of that? I think that's just an interesting point where with how much discourse there is going on around Anthony Richardson right now. I don't want to get into it on the podcast. That's a different topic for a different time, but would it make a difference on your ranking for this week?
Not for me. Because I don't want to constantly refer back to the Houston game where he threw for less than 200 yards with 4 touchdowns.
Right.
But he can do that on any given week. Excuse me. Doesn't matter who they're playing, right? So it may not be the shootout kind of stat line that you would see, but I think again, Darnold can put up 3-4 touchdowns on any given week.
Yeah, I would agree. I think comes from, like, with Flacco, you're going to see more yards. With Anthony Richardson, you're going to see better field position throughout the game, which is the way the two teams are playing. So obviously, like Ty said, more touchdowns than in that kind of a game.
Yeah, I just wanted to at least throw that out there because, I agree. I think Joe Flacco is going to step in and spin it against a really bad Viking secondary. If he's going to make this offense throw the ball more, then that is only good news for Sam Darnold this week. Got to give a shout out to my doppelganger here because I think you can fire up Matthew Stafford at the quarterback position this week. Matthew Stafford, he's got the band all back together. He got Cooper Kupp back last week and Puka Nacua, surprisingly, on Thursday Night Football against the Vikings. He tossed 4 touchdowns in that game, despite only throwing 3 on the season prior to that game. So he went and doubled his touchdown total just in that one game. He finished as the quarterback 5 on the week with 25.7 fantasy points. You look at the last 4 out of 5 quarterbacks to play against the Seahawks, they have gone for at least 20 fantasy points. So I think the secondary is a little bit more leaky than we may be giving it credit for in Seattle. So if you're in a pinch and you need to pick up a guy off the waiver wire who, like, Stafford was struggling to start the season. He was a rough start if you needed him in a pinch. But now that he's back throwing touchdowns, this offense is fully healthy again. Yeah, Stafford's an easy one to plug and play this week, especially when you love the matchup with the Seahawks. Which, as you said with Geno, Cameron, this game could be high scoring.
Yeah, if you remember back to last season, you don't think of Matthew Stafford as being a great fantasy quarterback. But weeks 12 through 17, he had Kupp and Puka, and he was fully healthy as well. He was the quarterback 6 over that stretch, averaging 20 fantasy points per game. So, like you said, when those two are out there, this offense is really, really good. And it seems like it does run through Kyron. But when you got Puka and Cooper Kupp, you're going to put up points at the same time. So, yeah, I like Matthew Stafford as long as Cooper Kupp and Puka are playing.
Where are you at on Stafford this week, Ty?
I nearly had him as a top 12 option this week. I still gave the edge to Baker just because.
Sure. I mean, he's been playing
phenomenal. But Seattle is still struggling against the pass. They're allowing the 7th most passing yards per game over the last 3 weeks. Right, like this feels like it's really simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it.
Before we move on to the quarterback sits of the week, I want to encourage you all to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Turn on that notification bell as well so you're alerted when all of our newest episodes are up. I am very confident you will thoroughly enjoy our channel as we are posting fantasy football content 3 days a week, full form podcast episodes for you all with plenty to talk about. We do 24 players in this episode. We're going to start getting into some second half league winners, second half rankings, second half schedules as well coming up. And eventually, once the trade season is over, we're going to get into some deeper dives into fantasy football rankings. So again, if you are a fantasy football fan, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell. We're grateful for that percentage of you that already is subscribed, already watches our videos routinely. I'd like to see that number go up, though. I keep talking to the 93% out there who haven't yet, but I'm confident if you hit that subscribe button, you will enjoy the content that we are putting out for you all. Let's transition to quarterback sits of the week here, fellas. Cameron, I'll start with you. Who are you sitting at the quarterback position this week?
I'm sitting CJ Stroud, and I think we've been talking so much about how disappointing Patrick Mahomes has been that CJ Stroud's kind of flown under the radar as a quarterback who, we drafted really high but hasn't been playing well. As of right now, CJ Stroud averaging the same amount of points per game as Derek Carr, less than Aaron Rodgers, less than Trevor Lawrence, less than Bo Nix, less than Sam Darnold. It hasn't been pretty. He's a quarterback 22 on the week, and now he has no Nico Collins and no Stephon Diggs this week. Plus, he gets the Jets. And the Jets have held every quarterback except for Russell Wilson, which is an amazing, amazing stat, to under 220 yards. And I really don't see CJ Stroud putting up great numbers against them this week. Like I said, just Tank Dell out there. I think they're going to rely on Joe Mixon a lot in this one. And over the whole season, I talked about how poorly he's doing, but only one game with more than 20 fantasy points, 5 of 8 games so far with under 17 fantasy points, which is that 17-18 range is pretty much our cutoff for what a week top 12 quarterback is on a week. So that means 5 of 8 weeks. He's for sure finishing outside of that. I think that continues again this week.
Yeah, Jets defense, third lowest pass rate over expectation this year. Teams are electing to run the ball on them more. The Texans, interesting. Bobby Slowick has just like changed his MO entirely. We talked about this earlier this week on our fantasy draft redo, where he's running the ball more this year. The Texans are averaging 27.5 carries per game compared to 25.3 last year. So they have switched over to being a little bit more of a run focused offense. So Ty, where are you at on CJ Stroud? Are you kind of tossing in the towel? Are you waving the white flag? Because Cameron's right. I mean, it has been disappointing this year.
Yeah, definitely tossing in the towel on this matchup at least. Now I will say Bobby Tree's legacy game inbound. I'm totally joking. Okay. Bobby Trees, Xavier Hutchinson, Dalton Schultz, John Mechie, any other receiver that they have on their team is not going to make up for CJ Stroud being a startable option here in fantasy. It is best to find a streamer. And it's crazy to think that like you should play Bo Nix over CJ Stroud this week.
I mean, I don't hate that. Bo Nix has kind of been balling recently.
And he gets Baltimore.
Yeah, you have to for sure.
Yeah, the matchup is there too. Yeah, I mean, that's just like a crazy statement I never thought we would say at the start of the season, but here we are, week 9, halfway through the season, saying crazy things like Bo Nix is probably the better play than CJ Stroud this week. I mean, I don't like, hey, I don't disagree, but like, you know, when that rolls off the tongue, it's just like, oh boy, okay, all right, yep, this is happening.
We're here.
We're here. I'll come right back to you, Ty. Who's your quarterback set?
It's Kirk O'Chains. Kirk Cousins, and credit where credit's due. He was the quarterback 3 in the week. He was Cam's start of the week last week. So, hey, kudos to you, Cam. Good call on that one. Look, this week against the Cowboys, though, has me really scared. And I'll let you both take a guess why I don't like Kirk this week.
Because Bijan Robinson is the GOAT.
Sure. Maybe not the primary reason, but I like that one a lot.
I'm sure your dynasty team does.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Cam?
I have no idea. I didn't even listen to what you said, I'm going to be honest.
Oh, jeez. I give you kudos and you just tune me out. All right, whatever. The defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys is Mike Zimmer. The guy that absolutely dreaded having Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. And as a defensive guru, I think that Mike Zimmer is going to pull out all the tricks, going to pull out all the stops because he knows how to affect Kirk Cousins the most. Now, if Micah Parsons is out, right, he still isn't practicing just yet, but if he's out, I feel slightly better about the matchup, but still not good enough to still start Kirk Cousins this week. Again, it's just a vibe that I have, a little like Mike Zimmer revenge game against his former quarterback. That's where I'm going this week.
I would probably play 15-ish other quarterbacks ahead of Kirk Cousins this week. I don't think you need to force him into your lineup by any means. My quarterback sit of the week, we'll keep moving on the quarterback sits. Tua Tagovailoa. This is a fascinating matchup with the Bills for Tua. He did play well in his first game back last week against Arizona, 28 of 38 for 234 and a touchdown. That only comes out to 14.6 fantasy points, though. You look at how Buffalo has performed against quarterbacks this year. Quietly stingy, 5th fewest fantasy points per game allowed to the position. And your crazy stat for Tua Tagovailoa today, if you take out the game earlier this season where he suffered yet another concussion, he has scored 15 or less fantasy points against the Bills in 4 of his last 5 games against them. So I could see this being a matchup where it's a Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert heavy run game. I don't think necessarily that means like Tyreek Hill is 100% going to suffer. He still had a serviceable week last week, but you know, when you're only getting 14.6 points from Tua Tagovailoa and he's giving you 15 or less in 4 of his last 5 against Buffalo, I'm sorry, that just doesn't spark a lot of confidence in me.
Yeah, I mean, Buffalo has been a real tough matchup all season long to throw on. You've been able to run all over them, but they've really slowed teams down. Like you said, he has 0 rushing upside. We want to talk about any quarterback right now that's going to have 0 rushing upside. It's probably him and Matthew Stafford, right?
Yeah,
and because even if he wanted to run, I'm sure all the Dolphins are like, do not, under any circumstances for the rest of the year, leave the pocket. So He has to throw 2+ touchdowns. He has to hit 250 yards if you want him to be a top 12 quarterback on the week. The Bills is just not the team that is going to happen against.
How far down is Tua in your rankings, Ty?
Great question. Tua is my quarterback 16. I have him ranked ahead of Kirk still, and that may be a little too harsh, but both of these quarterbacks are in a tier of quarterbacks that I just really would advise looking elsewhere. Again, like I would still play Bo Nix over Tua this week for sure.
Well, moving on to the running backs here. Let's get to the running back starts of the week. And Cameron, we'll start with you. Who's your running back start of the week?
Yeah, for me, my running back start this week is DeAndre Swift, and I know we've been a little more anti DeAndre Swift over the last couple of weeks. Last year, but he has been awesome. And to be honest, I'm very happy about it. DeAndre Swift is a guy we wanted to be good for so long.
It's just 2 years too early.
Yes, just never quite got into it. He is the running back 4 in points per game since week 4 right now. He has had 20+ points in every single week, 16+ carries each week, 100+ scrimmage yards, and a touchdown. The dude has been on fire. And we told you, hey, this sell window is coming up for DeAndre Swift. The schedule is pretty right now, but it's coming up quick. So if he's still on your team, you better be starting him right now. And he gets the Cardinals. And since week 3, the Cardinals are getting up over 130 rushing yards a game. We've seen Swift be involved in the passing game. We've seen him be involved, obviously, in the run game, 16+ carries a week. The worry was maybe Roschon Johnson's going to come in, start stealing some touchdowns. And Roschon Johnson did have a touchdown last week. But at the same time, so did DeAndre Swift. So he's still scoring each week. Still super involved. Great matchup. Fire up DeAndre Swift this week.
Yeah, my biggest concern was when DeAndre Swift had his first monster week. Is this really what we're going to get from Shane Waldron, this downhill offense? And while the rest of the offense continues to try and get cute around him, when you're freaking trying to run your offensive lineman up the middle for a touchdown, like you're trying to be Ben Johnson, right? Like the constant, at least still since that first breakout DeAndre Swift game this year, has been that he is going to be involved, that he is the lead back, and that he's going to feast in these good matchups. Ty, I assume you got to be in the same boat here with how well DeAndre Swift has been playing.
Yeah, I am. And it was kind of funny because Cam said, like, Ty took all of my starts this week. If I didn't choose Brian Robinson, it would have been DeAndre Swift. So, like, we pretty much
your start, and we haven't got to you yet.
Oh,
dude,
Tyler,
no,
cut it. Oh my gosh, everyone's gonna stop.
Jackson, get in here and edit this thing.
Ridiculous.
Man,
Brutal.
already.
What? Oh,
well, now that you expose your start, Ty, you may as well just keep going now. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, Brian Robinson. Since returning from his injury, he's only put up 13.1 and 8.6 fantasy points. But I'm here to tell you that neither of those performances are necessarily like his own faults or anything like that, or a change in his role or anything like that. He's gotten 12 and 16 carries. And against Chicago this past Sunday, 6 of his carries were in the red zone. So again, like the role is not changing. And this week we get the New York Giants.
Barbecue chicken alert. Barbecue chicken alert.
What was that, Shaq?
Barbecue chicken alert. Barbecue chicken alert.
Oh, barbecue chicken, like to the moon with this matchup against the Giants. Okay, the Giants over the last 3 weeks have not been good against the run. They've allowed a 100-yard rusher in each of the last 3 games. They're allowing the 3rd most rushing yards per game and yards per carry on the year. This is like Brian Robinson could legitimately crack the top 10. He hasn't finished as a top 10 running back in a single week this year. He can definitely do so this week.
Not gonna lie, I totally thought you were saving that drop for a different player. So the fact you broke it out there, it surprised me. It got me.
He better hit now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Right. If you're dropping barbecue chicken on Brian Robinson in this game, I mean, again, it's not that it's a bad matchup. It's a fine matchup for him. But yeah, where are you at on Brian Robinson this week, Cameron? I feel like Brian Robinson is never a guy I'm like overly excited to start. And the Giants, I'm like, I know where I want to target them in their defense, and they've been exploitable in the run game. But yeah, how do you feel about Brian Robinson this week?
Yeah, I don't want to say it because of the Alabama connection, but he's like Najee Harris. He really is, except he doesn't quite try and hurdle as much. My concern right now is my concern right now with Brian Robinson is that he's been outsnapped in his last 3 games by Austin Eckler. It's just that he's just not on the field as much. We're losing the receiving game from Brian Robinson. Not that he had a ton to begin with.
Right.
And obviously, with Jaden Daniels being more of a running quarterback, like Ty said, though, he's still getting the work. He's still seeing the carries when he's on the field. It's almost like the Derrick Henry role from last year of Austin Eckler or Tyjae Spears is out there unless they're running the ball. And then you put Brian Robinson in, which is kind of where he's at. And you got a plus matchup against the Giants, who just got torched by Najee Harris. So yeah. I mean, I'm not like the biggest fan. I'm not against it. I think he's a running back 2 this week, somewhere between 15 and 24, which would make him a start.
Right. It would make him a very serviceable start in your lineup, even though you're not super excited to play him. It's not like a smash ceiling play, but it's unlikely the floor is just going to fall off from underneath him in this matchup.
Yes, exactly.
I'll talk about someone who is a little bit more exciting. Not that Brian Robinson isn't exciting, not to rag on your pick or anything, Ty, but I just think Chase Brown is the more fun player. And I think a lot of people, what are you giving me that look for? Chase
What
Brown
do you
is
mean more fun player?
Yeah,
I mean,
I gotta say, both of these guys are kind of. That's all I'm gonna say.
Chase Brown at least has more explosiveness than Brian Robinson. We gotta be honest about that.
Yes.
I won't beat a dead horse here or beat around the bush. Let's 2 totally different sayings. I'm running on 3 hours of sleep. Look, Chase Brown gets the Las Vegas Raiders this week. He has outsnapped and outtouched Zach Moss in every game since week 4. So this backfield is slowly becoming his, except for the pass protection and passing work downs where Zach Moss is still filtering in there. But Chase Brown has been seeing 15 plus touches per game in each of those 5 games since week 4. The Raiders this year, they are top 10 in rushing yards and fantasy points per game allowed to running backs. They've given up the 4th most rush yards over expectation this year as well. So for a guy whose MO is, speed, burst, efficiency, I really like Chase Brown in this exploitable matchup against the Raiders, who I just don't think have as good of a run defense as maybe the underlying metrics say they do. So yeah, fire up Chase Brown here. I think all he needs to do is break off a big run or 2 here, and we are 100% in business.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously a great matchup. He's starting to kind of take over that role. The Cincinnati backfield does scare me. It
Totally.
scares me off a little bit. I think you 2 went a little deeper with your running back starts than I did. I said for the audio people that I went deep, but I think you 2 went deeper than I did for your running back starts here. But I think he's going to be a top 24 running back. I think that, like you said, it's a good enough matchup. He's getting enough volume that you should probably be firing up Chase Brown this week. What are you laughing at, Ty?
Yeah, I was gonna say you're giggling over there.
What are you laughing at?
It's the backpedal from you after telling me like I kind of was thinking about Brian Robinson as my start this week, and now I got to pivot, and now he's gotten outsnapped by Austin Eckler in back-to-back weeks, and now you guys went a little bit deeper than I did with DeAndre Swift.
You did. DeAndre Swift's been the running back 4 for the last 4 weeks. Like that is the low-hanging fruit kind of a pick, and I'm going to be honest, those haven't worked out for me, so I probably shouldn't have done it. Hashtag Jordan Mason, but you know what?
Yeah, right.
We really learn.
Let's transition to the running back sits of the week here. Cameron, will start with you. This one's a bummer, but I think it's 100% spot on.
Yeah, he was my sell this week, and I really hate to do this again, but it's J.K. Dobbins. And over the last 5 weeks, his yards per carry, 2.9, 2.3, 3.8, 2.9, 3.4. He's going up against Cleveland this week, who is allowing the 6th least amount of points to running backs. I understand. It's the Jim Harbaugh way. We run the ball, we run the ball, we run the ball. Even though Justin Herbert's been playing on another planet recently with absolutely no one to throw to, it's still looking unreal. We're going to run the ball, and that's what we're going to do. But Cleveland offensively, on top of being a great run defense, they're starting to cook they cooked a little bit last week with Jameis Winston. And I think this offense with this moving the ball a little bit more, you're keeping the defense off the field. You're keeping, the Chargers offense off the field more. I think the volume for J.K. Dobbins is going to be a little bit lower in this one. So I just think not being efficient, not hitting those home runs. If he doesn't score a touchdown, you're probably left with a single-digit week from him this week.
Yeah, it's just sad to see how his efficiency has been going down. And this is like one of the things that I was worried about is, look, he's been great and efficient to start the year, but at some point he's going to run out of steam, and when is Kamani Vidal going to start to step in and get more of that workload when they see how inefficient J.K. Dobbins has been as of late? Where are you at on J.K. Dobbins this week, Ty? Do you think he's still a playable piece, or is he actually kind of on the outside of your top 24, top 25 running backs?
I'm torn because part of me says like you can't really go away from the guy that you know is going to get touches.
Yeah.
And if he were to fall into the end zone, it's a semi-solid week for the guy. But if he doesn't, because of he did have 7 targets and 4 catches this past Sunday, but he's usually good for about 2 to 3 catches. So it's like the receiving work isn't necessarily going to make up for a potential lack of rushing production then. So I get sitting him. I also get playing him because again, like the role that he has, that he's going to get touches.
I'll come right back to you here, Ty. Who's your running back set?
Tank Bigsby. Yeah, we were literally a yard away from making a 10-point week to a 16-point week. But things are just a little bit different this week. Doug Peterson said that he feels good about Travis Etienne being back for Sunday. Now, we've been fooled before by Doug EP with these kind of things, but the door is slightly open now for Etienne to return. And that just means a smaller workload and less snaps for Tank. So all of those things, and then you get Philly this week. And since coming back from their week 5 bye, Philly is allowing less than 80 rushing yards per game. That's the second fewest, and just 3.7 yards per carry, the 6th fewest in that span as well. There really is no reason for Tank to be in your lineups this week. You're banking on a big play, and I just don't think that happens against a good defense like this.
Yeah, if Travis Etienne is back and you get the good defensive matchup, I do see how it's enticing. I do see how it's, Tank becomes a problematic piece in your lineup of do I play him or do I not? If Travis Etienne is back, are you on board with this, Cameron?
Yeah, I 100% am. I think I'm on board with it, even if Travis Etienne doesn't play in this one. I'd be shying away from Tank with the matchup. But yeah, and if you have Etienne, you're like, hey, you know what? He's back. He's finally healthy, hopefully. I'm not firing him up either. I'm staying away from this Jacksonville backfield as a whole. You look at Tank over the last 4 weeks, 25, then 2, 23, then 10. Both those 20-point weeks, he had 2 touchdowns. Do we really think that Tank's going to fall into the end zone twice this week? No. Do we really think he's going to fall in the end zone once this week? Probably not. He just doesn't get any receiving work, and if the efficiency's not there and he's not scoring a touchdown, it just doesn't feel like it's going to be a great week from him.
You all know who's really not going to have a great week this week, despite making him my start of the week last week. I mean, Javonte Williams and I got some beef, man. I mean, how are you not going to get it done against the Carolina freaking Panthers? The team that the team that, getting absolutely chopped up by Bo Nix. How can you not get it done against the worst run defense in the entire league? Like, if you're over on YouTube and watching the All-22, it's pretty bad for Javonte Williams last week. But I'm sorry, you can't get it done against the Panthers. You just end up on my crap list. Simple as that. And if you think, if I can't even trust you against the Panthers, how in the world am I supposed to trust you against the Baltimore Ravens? 7th fewest fantasy points per game allowed to running backs. They're giving up only 3.3 yards per carry. The 5th lowest defensive EPA per rush. This is not a matchup I want to target. This is such an easy sit this week. Don't let this man disgrace your lineup. It is it's an eyesore if he's sitting there. If you don't think you have another option, you have another option. Your other option is whoever's on the waiver wire, frankly. I'm sorry. If you can't get it done against the worst run defense in football, where it is an easy, yes, I start you. I don't even have to think about it. And Javonte Williams can't even rack up, 45 rushing yards? You've got to be kidding me. It was an abysmal day for Javonte against the worst run defense in the league. I have zero interest in him against the Ravens.
Yeah, Ravens run defense has been awesome this week. I just looking at their schedule real quick. There's probably 2 running backs that you're even going to think about starting the rest of the season who play the Ravens because they've just been that good. And you know what? I don't want anything to do with it. You got an offense that could easily be shut down by Baltimore. And the scariest thing about Baltimore too is if they decide it's a Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson running week, you get 15 minutes of possession the entire game. That's it. I mean, you just don't even see the ball. And then you can't actually run on them anyways. So yeah, I do not think it's going to be a good week from Javonte at all in week 9.
Want to pile on here, Ty?
Nope, you guys have hit the nail on the head.
Let's take a quick break then. We'll be back with pass catching, start and sits afterwards. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. Gone through our quarterback and running back starts and sits of the week. Let's move on to the wide receivers here, fellas. Let's start there. Karen, for you, who is your wide receiver start of the week?
I'm scared. It's Calvin Ridley. It's probably not a good idea, but I'm going to do it.
Than I.
Yep. I should have just gone Darnell Mooney again, right, Ty? Because he is fantastic. I mean, but,
that man will never let you down. That man is as good as a Caniac combo every week.
Yes, he is. Calvin Ridley, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be that guy. I'm gonna trust him. I'm starting him in one of my leagues this week, and I'm scared. I'm gonna be sweating the entire time. I said last week you got to put in your big boy underpants for starting Darnell Mooney. I don't even know what to call the type of underpants you need on to start Calvin Ridley this week. Because it sounds like as long as he's healthy, Will Levis will be starting. And I understand, that's not a great proposition. You're not loving that. But it also feels like Will Levis is on a shortish leash. Mason Rudolph's not exactly a great back, great guy to come in. Hasn't had amazing success, but it feels like if Will Levis comes out, puts up a couple stinkers, he's probably done as a starter in the NFL for at least for the Titans. But the reason I like Calvin Ridley is he's playing New England, who's a bottom 10 pass defense in the NFL right now. And there's no more DeAndre Hopkins. Over the last 3 weeks, we've seen Calvin Ridley see 8 targets in a game where he had 0 receptions, which I don't think happens again. 9 targets and 15 targets last week against Detroit. This team's going to have to throw the ball. They're going to move the ball down have to try and move the ball down the field. The only guy you can really do that with is Calvin Ridley. I think it's just kind of, he's the default person that you have to throw the ball to, and you just paid him all this money, so you kind of got to keep him happy at the same time. He complained 3 weeks ago when he had 0 targets saying this is ridiculous. They give him 9 and 15 the next 2 weeks. So I don't know. I think it's going to be gross. It's one of those games that we always talk about. Don't watch. I mean, you shouldn't be watching New England and Tennessee anyways, unless you're like really desperate for a game. But I would not watch this if he's in your fantasy lineup, and just check the box score at the end of the day when it says 13 targets, 6 catches, 65 yards, and then hopefully he finds the end zone on top of it.
If you're going to be sweating this out, that's going to be a lot of sweat, man. I mean, it's going to be very, very sweaty by the end of the day. How bold are you on Calvin Ridley, Ty? I get the matchup is there. I'm worried a little bit about the Christian Gonzalez shadow. He has been playing well this year, but yeah, how confident? What's your confidence level in Calvin Ridley? That's what I'll ask.
What a gross question.
Isn't it? I felt gross asking it. You notice how I asked it a little more sheepishly? Like, what's your confidence level? I wouldn't want this asked of me either. Jeez.
I'd rather take a spear from Roman Reigns than play Calvin Ridley this week. OTC. That being said, like, chase the volume. The dude has gotten 8 or more targets in 3 straight games. So, like, you got that going for you. It's just a matter of, like, are we actually going to catch those? Because one of those games with 8 targets, he had a goose egg. He had 0 catches. So I get it. I get it. But man, this one kind of scares me a little bit as well.
Cameron, I'll buy you a Caniac combo if you can tell me who Roman Reigns is without Googling it right now.
WWE fighter. He used to play for the Minnesota Vikings, or wrestler, not fighter.
I'll give you bonus points for even naming the fact that he used to be on the Vikings roster. There you go.
That's the only reason I know who he is. Yes, sir.
You get a box combo, not a Caniac. You get a box.
All right. Dude, I want to be eating good next time we're all together. Caniac and a box. Yes, sir.
Ty, who's your wide receiver start of the week?
Josh Downs. Not as like not a popular name, not as popular of a name, but we have to play him at this point. I feel like anytime you talk about a Colts player, people will want you to talk about like the quarterback controversy that's going on right now. I don't want to get into it. It's a mess. That being said, though, there's arguably no one that's benefited more from a quarterback change this year than Josh Downs. With Richardson, in games with Anthony Richardson, Josh Downs was averaging 9.6 fantasy points. That's heavily skewed by this past Sunday. The other two games, he only put up 5 and 1 with Richardson. With Joe Flacco, he averages 19 fantasy points a game. And now he gets a prime matchup against Minnesota, the most pass funnel defense in the league. It is straightforward. Don't second guess this one. We've seen it already in three previous weeks. It's going to happen again this week with Flacco.
As long as Flacco is back there willing to sling it around the yard, I mean, I feel like you have to start up Josh Downs. Yeah, I don't want to. I have so many thoughts on the Anthony Richardson thing, but that's not what we're talking about. We are talking about Josh Downs and Joe Flacco as his quarterback, which is good news for fantasy football. And Cameron, this was one of the guys that I think you wanted prior to Tyler getting a jump on the document and taking it from you.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Downs was a guy I tried to warn you to about before the start of the season. You were like, hey, he's not a threat to Michael Pittman. Nah, dude's a threat. Not as big of a threat as Anthony Richardson is to Michael Pittman, but he is a threat. He is, he is leading the team in targets when he's on the field. Team targets share, and that's what I'm looking for when he's on the field. Flacco's not going to really chuck it down the field. I think right now he leads the league, or is worse than the league, in yards per attempt. I think it's like 5.6 or something disgusting like that. But Josh Downs, he's going to get targets. He's going to, like he said, Minnesota is going to give up receptions. It's going to be one of those games he could easily be like 10 catches for 85 yards, and you're pretty happy with it. But it's kind of disgusting from an NFL standpoint.
I do want to just say, some of us bought in on the Josh Downs hype, like you were selling this offseason, where I was able to buy Josh Downs for Jermaine Burton in a late 25-second round pick in our dynasty league.
Yeah, it's because I was buying in on the Jermaine Burton hype, and I lost on that, just like Treylon Burks. So I get it. I got to stop trading Indianapolis receivers for unproven rookies. I get it. Yeah, right. I get it. I get it.
That's a nice cover up for saying I ended up buying Lucas's propaganda on Adonai Mitchell prior to the season.
No, I was buying in on Burton. I was selling on Anthony Richardson, not on Josh Downs. All right.
No, I did have a fear. Not a fear. I thought Adonai Mitchell would be a much bigger factor in this offense, and he just has not been up to this point. We won't draw out our conversation on Josh Downs here. He's a great play against the Vikings this week. My wide receiver start of the week. This feels a little bit like DeAndre Swift, admittedly, but Terry McLaurin should be just like a lineup lock at this point, as long as Jaden Daniels is in at quarterback. I think you can expect him to bring the boom against the Giants this week. I feel like all I'm getting is like big justice, and
yes.
I'm on my feed right now. I actually kind of hate it, but that's a different conversation. Terry has actually been the wide receiver 10 in fantasy points per game since week 3, averaging 18 fantasy points per game. And he's actually averaged 16 fantasy points per game against the Giants for his career. I had George Pickens as my start of the week last week against this Giants secondary, and we were robbed of a touchdown that, I don't know, felt like a touchdown based on the NFL. We're not going to get
No. Have you seen the McAfee clip? One butt is 2 feet. One elbow is 2 feet, but 2 foot is not 2 feet. It's pretty simple.
2 feet.
This is obvious.
At any rate, we could sit here and debate whether it was a touchdown or not, but we were so close to another touchdown last week that would have elevated George Pickens to being a smash star last week. I mean, the Giants are still getting chewed up by perimeter wide receivers. 8th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers outside. 4th in completion percentage and yards per attempt to perimeter wide receivers. They've given up the highest passer rating on those targets as well this year. So, yeah, Terry McLaurin, he's an easy start this week. He's like the DeAndre Swift, where you were worried about it at the start of the season, but once this offense started clicking now with Jaden Daniels at quarterback, it is like, yeah, like, we're looking at top 15 upside this week.
For sure. I think the thing coming into the season is even those people who were pro Jaden Daniels did not expect Jaden Daniels to be playing quite on the level that he's at. Terry McLaurin right now, top 10 in target share on the season. He's tied for the most 50-yard receptions. He's first in air yards. So, I mean, they're using him down the field. He's getting thrown to a lot. There's really not a lot to dislike about Terry, especially in this matchup. I got to agree. You got to fire him up probably every week for the rest of the season.
How high is he in your rankings, Ty?
This week, he is my wide receiver 13, and I debated him putting him closer to the top 10 because I have Mike Evans and Devontae Smith ahead of him. And I'm like, man, I kind of like Terry a little bit more than both of those guys.
Is Mike Evans this week?
So that's the thing. Like, I think if Evans is back, ooh boy, that's three
episodes in a row with a voice
Jeez.
crack. Brutal.
May need to retire at this point. I don't know if Evans is back, but if he is, I mean, Baker's gonna be looking his way. I have to think, even against Kansas City. But regardless, Terry McLaurin, he gets 5 big booms this week. I mean, that's the best way I can explain it.
Boom.
Yeah, so it looks like Mike Evans is he's going to be out until after the week 11 bye. I was going to say I thought this hamstring injury was going to keep him on extended time. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So Terry McLaurin is a top 12 option.
Yeah. Yeah, that's been the speculation all along. I was going to say, I'm like, really, Mike Evans? I thought I'm not even considering him whatsoever because I thought he was missing extended time. So, anyways, fire up Terry McLaurin this week. Great option against the New York Football Giants. Wide receiver sits here, fellas. Let's plug along here. Cameron, who's your wide receiver sit?
It's Zay Flowers, and I really got to stop picking Zay Flowers because when I do, he does well. So probably
fire him up this week. You heard it here first.
Unfortunately for him, though, this week he does play Pat Surtain, and that is a big deal because the Broncos as a whole have allowed only 70 yards to a wide receiver 3 times on the season. Those 3 wide receivers were Jalen Coker, Mike Williams, and Jacoby Myers.
Shout out Jalen.
So, right, you're not except for Jacoby Myers, you're not really looking at them as wide receiver ones in their offense. Myers is the only wide receiver 1 in his offense to go for more than 55 receiving yards on the season. So, right, you're just not looking at it as like, oh, this is great. And they've played DK Metcalf, George Pickens, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, Garrett Wilson, Lad McConkey. So I'm right. They've played some decent names who should have put up good weeks and just haven't. They've allowed only 4 passing touchdowns on the season. Yeah, I just think that this is a Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson running the ball show. For probably the same reason I said to sit, or one of the same reasons that we said sit Javonte Williams. I think you should probably also sit Zay Flowers this week.
Yeah, I don't hate the reality of just acknowledging like when the passing pie is so small in this offense, when they commit to the run like they do, like if that's what you're projecting, then the pie is just going to be significantly smaller for Zay Flowers, and you bring in Deontay Johnson to chip into that as well. Mm-hmm. And like I don't think Deontay Johnson's going to get a crap ton of reps off rip, but definitely something to at least consider when you're considering whether or not to play Zay Flowers this week. Where are you at on Zay Flowers, Ty? Because again, it seems like whenever we're like, yeah, I don't know, he just seems to break off enough big games or just get all of the wide receiver volume, and it just kind of doesn't matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'm really torn on Zay Flowers because I'm not exactly how much Pat Surtain will be on Zay Flowers. And that being said, like Surtain has followed literally everybody everywhere, so it may not even matter at that point. I also just think maybe because I have him as my wide receiver 32 on the week. So maybe that ranking is a little bit of like hey, Pat Surtain isn't going to be on him like the entire game, but I completely get not taking the risk.
Speaking of not taking the risk, I feel like that should be like the theme of your next guy here, especially when even though Cameron said his quarterback was a start of the week, so not to give it away, but I find your sit very fascinating despite liking the matchup.
Yeah, Jackson Smith and Jigba has been slightly disappointing ever since week 2. I mean, let's be honest. Like he has had a couple of games where he's put up 13, he had 10, but it's not been as great as we were hoping it would be at this point for how for how often this Seattle offense is passing the ball. JSN, yes, he's been getting targets, but they're just not going anywhere right now. We've been ranking JSN as a top 30 wide receiver weekly so far this year. And while he's been close, he hasn't finished higher than the wide receiver 30, except for one game this year. Again, back in week 2. He's averaging just under 11 fantasy points in his last 5 games. So you can probably play him as just kind of a low end, high floor kind of flex play. There's just no ceiling for JSN at this point. And again, silver lining, he's getting around 8 targets a game. But the problem is nothing is downfield. So if you're not getting there, maybe the best way to say it is this: his targets aren't going anywhere. It kind of feels like it feels like the J.K. Dobbins a little bit of just like, you're going to get touches. They're just not going to go anywhere. So I think at this point, it's wise to kind of look elsewhere from JSN. Again, when you think of JSN, you think of that like, hey, maybe this could be the week where he kind of steps up and he kind of breaks out a little bit. I just don't think it happens this week because it hasn't the last 5 weeks.
As the individual who has his quarterback as the start of the week, Cameron, where do you lie on JSN? Are you with Ty of like, yeah, it's definitely more of a floor play than it is a ceiling play, or do you think there's a chance for JSN to have a bigger game here finally?
I gotta agree that it's more of a floor play. It just feels like at this point, I just don't see the upside, right? The crazy upside with him. I mean, obviously it's a good matchup, so maybe there is a little bit more, but I'm kind of okay with moving forward with JSN. If you just go until I see a game of, I mean, I think last week he had 12 points, 6 catches for 67 yards or something like that. Until I see a game of 15 points, I'm just leaving him on my bench. I'm okay missing a week of it because it's just been like 8 to 12, and I just don't feel like that's that crazy. So I'm okay if you want to do that. Obviously, week 2 gave you that bump of like, oh, I can't put him on my bench now. And then he, so that kind of honestly kind of stunk more than it helped your team probably. But I'm okay with leaving him on his bench till you really see something worthy of putting him in the lineup for.
Yeah, speaking of leaving someone on your bench until he gives you a lineup worthy performance, Jordan Addison has been holding on to a decent amount of name value, but it's been actually really bad for Jordan Addison this year. This has nothing to do with the matchup against the Colts. I actually like the matchup against the Colts from a statistical perspective, but this has everything to do with the lack of volume he's been getting this year. Like even before getting TJ Hawkinson back in this week, it was 4 targets for 3 receptions in week 1, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 8 targets in week 5, 3 receptions, 4 targets, 3 receptions, 3 targets, 2 receptions. Like Jordan Addison only has 1 game with more than 10 fantasy points this year. And even last week, Addison had the second highest separation rate in the league at 91.6%, yet he still didn't get fed the football. So I don't know what we're waiting on for this guy. Like the volume just hasn't been there. And unless this is truly like the 2022 matchup between these two teams, where the Colts are leading 33-0 at halftime, and it's going to take all sorts of heroics from the Vikings to come back and even put up a fight in this game. Like what is supposed to change here for Jordan Addison? We've already had good matchups to take advantage of, and it just ends up being 4 targets for 3 receptions majority of the time.
Yeah, it's just you just haven't seen anything you've liked.
No.
Last year it was the touchdowns. That was what kind of kept him in it. And obviously, Justin Jefferson back. Justin Jefferson's the number 1 option. Like you said, you get TJ Hawkinson back. How much does Hawkinson eat into it, right? We're not expecting a full workload from Hawkinson. But if he just takes an extra 5 receptions, yeah, well, I mean, you could be seeing his full workload. But if you see like an extra 5 targets going his way, we could see Jordan Addison seeing three targets, and then he's been upset in the media. It seemed right. He did the free 3 or whatever. So he hasn't.
That's not the squeaky. This isn't a squeaky wheel.
No, I don't think it is either. I think if anything, it's more of a, okay, your playing time goes down. We'll start Jalen Naylor, who has, hasn't been a headache all year long, kind of a thing. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think him and JSN are very similar for me. I'm not really interested in starting them until I really see something worth starting out of them.
Looked like you had a point to chime in with here, Ty, when we brought up TJ Hawkinson. Golly, make that 3 episodes in a row. This man does not know how to hit an unmute button.
I don't even remember
you know when
hitting
that
the mute
little
button.
when that little microphone down below there is red. You know when that thing is red, that means we can't hear you. So you got to make sure that's changed before you talk, silly goose.
I didn't even know when I hit mute, so I feel like one of you guys pranked me, but
You deserve that
Hey,
one.
I do. KOC himself in his press conference today said that Hawkinson will not be on a snap count on Sunday against the Colts. He's healthy and ready to go. So that just casts even more of a shadow than for Addison. I remember looking back at the film from Thursday night between the Rams and the Vikings, and I literally sent this to you guys. The red zone trip pass attempt to Jefferson where he's double teamed in the end zone and he slips, so it goes incomplete. Addison is wide open on the other side. Like it's like Darnold isn't even looking that way. So I don't know if last week was just so much of a like, hey, let's get the ball to Jefferson kind of game. But when we're missing those kind of opportunities, it's hard to again rely on these guys as fantasy options when again they're just not even being looked at.
Let's wrap it up here, fellas, with the tight ends. Everybody's favorite segment of the week. Who in the world do I start at my tight end position this week? And funny enough, we actually got some prevalent names coming back here. So we're not getting gross and saying K. Otten, even though it absolutely freaking schmacked last week. But Cameron, who's your tight end start of the week?
K. Otten.
Yes! Yes!
I'm going back to it. I'm going back to it. He doesn't deserve it anymore. He doesn't.
We need to change that off the K. Otten noise. That needs to go back to the Cameron noise.
Yes. K. Otten, tight end 6 right now. Been phenomenal. Right? We saw 27 points from him, or 29, from him last week. Since week 3, 8 targets, 9 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets, 10 targets, 10 targets. And guess what? There is no Mike Evans and no Chris Godwin again this week. He's facing the team in Kansas City who's been the worst team against tight ends from a fantasy perspective all season long. Start him up, throw him in that lineup. K. Otten, top 8 option this week.
I mean, it just has to be when there's nobody else to catch the football on this team. I mean, there's Jalen McMillan, who decent little game, but yeah, we could get the K. Otten show once again in this game. Ty, what about you? Who's your tight end start of the week?
My tight end start very similar to Calvin Ridley here. It's Mark Andrews. Ready to get hurt again with this one. Andrews has been the tight end 7 the last 4 weeks. He's averaging 15 fantasy points a game. So he's been startable. And I think a lot of people have been kind of waiting for the floor to fall out, and it hasn't. And I'm fully aware that it probably will happen now this week because I'm calling him to start, but Andrews hasn't topped 5 targets in a game. So it's there, right? And he's scored in each of the last 3 games. So that's helped as well. But he's getting the high value targets. So Denver may be tough. They haven't played an offense like Baltimore at all this year. Their last 3-4 games, you get Carolina, you get New Orleans with Spencer Rattler, you get I don't remember the other 2 teams, but like they have not played a Baltimore at all this year. Yeah. So I'm expecting Andrews to still come through again.
Oh, I think you named it. He's getting the high value targets, and it's no longer the like, why are we getting Isaiah Likely 5 targets a game? Why don't we just feed all that to Andrews, who is the most prolific tight end in our room here? I'm going to go ahead, fire up another early round tight end you drafted this year. Sammy Ballgame, go ahead, start up our boy Sam Laporta this week. We are on week 2 of the Jameson Williams suspension. And in the first game of that suspension, Sam Laporta caught all 6 of his targets for 48 yards and a score. He put up 16.8 fantasy points, finished as the tight end 8 on the week after a fun little pitch to David Montgomery and touchdown catch in the end zone for David Montgomery. He had Green Bay in this game too, who just is actually a fairly good match for tight ends this year. 5th most yards allowed to tight ends, 4th most yards over the last 4 weeks. So if Sam Laporta is going to get the volume here, I think you can play him as a semi-reliable option here. I'm not going to sit here and promise you he's going to be top 3, but if Sam Laporta gives you top 10 production this week, I think we're in business again now that James Williams is out.
Yeah, and I mean, James Williams is in the news again now, if you haven't seen, so he could be out even longer. So this could be a start for the rest of the season kind of a thing.
Man.
This team's going to score, and Sam Laporta is, good at scoring touchdowns. So it's like, well, might as well throw him in there and just hope that, you're going to kind of recoup kind of what you paid up for him at the beginning of the year. I think you have to, even if you don't really want to start him, right? But like you said, it's a good matchup. He should be good to go this week.
Let's do rapid fire round of tight end sits here because nobody wants to hear us sit and talk about tight ends who they probably aren't even considering starting in the first place. So, Ty, give me your or Cameron. We'll start with you because you started the whole episode. Tight end sit of the week for you.
Hunter Henry. Titans are the 5th best team against tight ends. Drake May is a question mark on if he's even going to play with the concussion. I just don't really want anything to do with it, right? I mean, he's looked decent with Drake May, but especially if there's no Drake May, I don't really want it. And against the Titans, I'm just not excited about it at all.
How about you, Ty? Who's your tight end set?
Dallas Goedert. He's questionable, so he may not even play. But if he does, no thanks.
Ty doesn't want to get burned, so he's just picking a guy who's not even going to be out there. Mike Evans and Dallas Goedert, my sits of the week. Rasheed Rice, don't play him.
Rasheed Shaheed might be a deep pit and deep pull, but no, don't play him this week.
I'm not starting Anthony Richardson. Sorry, Ty.
Anthony Richardson sit of the week.
This may not even be the Cameron noise anymore. This is the Tyler noise at this point.
That's
Finish him.
My tight end sit of the week, Isaiah Likely. Last week was Likely's first game where he had more than receiving yards, 30 receiving yards in the game since week 1. So now you just add Deontay Johnson to this roulette wheel of pass catchers, and I just don't have any interest whatsoever. Only has 3 games with more than 2 receptions on the year. Like you said, Ty, Mark Andrews is getting more involved here. So Isaiah Likely at this point, I'm like debating if he's droppable, which just sucks knowing how much fab people spent on him at the start of the year. I think we can emotionally get past that and say like Isaiah Likely, unless if he has a big game this week, totally just flips my sit of the week on its head. We might actually be looking at him as a cut candidate here within the next week, and a lot of people probably have already, honestly. So Isaiah Likely will be my tight end sit of the week. That's all we've got, though. 24 different players that will change the outcome of your week 9 matchup in fantasy football. Again, if you have any start-sit questions, any waiver wire questions, trade questions, as well as we're nearing the trade deadline in some leagues. So, week 11, 12 is when we start getting to that range. Head over to our Discord, down in the link in the description of the audio podcast or YouTube video you are listening to. We are over 4,000 members strong over there who are blowing up our Discord daily with all sorts of questions, polls, and everything. There's plenty for you to engage with, but also to allow others to engage with your questions as well. So you can head over there. It's 100% free to have all of your fantasy football questions answered and discussed. You can follow our pages on the socials as well. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler _Plath for Tyler. The fellow socials are FF Fellas on Twitter, the FF Fellas on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. We'll be back next week. Some second half league winners to kick off the week. We'll be back with trade targets. We'll be back with 24 more players who will change the outcome of your week 10 matchup. So again, if you're not subbed already, make sure you do that. Turn on that notification bell as well. I promise you will enjoy the content that we put out for you if you do love fantasy football. Till next week, y'all, stay safe, stay healthy. Best of luck in your week 10 matchups. Deuces.
Deuces.